She was my boss, confident, untouchable. But that night, when the office lights dimmed and her voice softened, she whispered words that changed everything. "Tonight, you're not my employee, you're mine." The office was unusually silent that night, the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel magnified. The hum of the printer, the faint clicking of the clock, the distant echo of a closing elevator door. I was the only one left on the floor, or so I thought. My laptop screen cast a soft glow across the desk, papers spread in organized chaos, coffee gone cold hours ago. I was halfway through revising the quarterly report when I heard the familiar click of heels on the polished tile. A steady, measured rhythm. I looked up, and there she was, Ms. Hartley, my boss. 40-something, always composed, always a step ahead of everyone else in the room. Tonight, though, something felt different. She wasn't carrying her usual stack of files, just a single folder tucked under her arm. Her coat draped over one shoulder, hair slightly undone as though the long day had loosened its hold on her. There was a trace of weariness in her expression, but also a calm kind of grace that made the empty office feel suddenly less cold. "You're still here?" she asked, her voice low but not unkind. "Just wanted to finish this section," I replied, sitting up straighter. "Didn't think anyone else was still around." She set the folder on my desk, her fingers brushing the edge of my hand by accident, or maybe not. The touch was brief but warm, and for a moment I forgot what I was about to say. "It's late," she murmured, glancing at my screen, then at me. "You've done more than enough for today." Her perfume lingered faintly, something subtle and elegant, the kind that doesn't announce itself but draws you in when you're close enough. It made the air between us feel strangely intimate for such an ordinary moment. "I don't mind," I said, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. "Sometimes it's easier to focus when everyone else is gone." She gave a quiet chuckle, rare from her, and shook her head. "I know the feeling." For a few seconds, we both stood in the hum of the after-hours office, either rushing to break the silence. I found myself noticing details I usually overlooked. The soft curve of her smile, the faint tiredness in her eyes, the way her fingers rested lightly on the desk as if anchoring herself there. "Come on," she said at last, her tone softening. "Let's lock up. There's a little cafe still open down the street. Coffee won't fix everything, but it might help us both feel human again." I hesitated only for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Sure. Let me just shut this down." As I packed my things, I felt the oddest flutter of awareness. This was the first time I'd ever been alone with her like this, outside the usual rhythm of meetings and memos. And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, the night suddenly felt like it was holding its breath. The cafe was nearly empty when we arrived, just the low hum of a distant espresso machine and the faint clinking of cups behind the counter. It wasn't the kind of place you linger in during the day, but at night, under the warm amber lights, it felt almost like a pause from the world. She held the door for me as we stepped inside, her coat slipping slightly off one shoulder. The winter air still clung to it, carrying that quiet chill that made the warmth of the cafe feel like a small relief. We chose a table by the window, the one with a flickering candle stub and a view of the rain-slick street outside. "2 cappuccinos?" she told the barista without even asking what I wanted. It made me smile. She already remembered from our morning meetings. For a while, we just sat there, fingers curled around the cups when they arrived, letting the steam rise between us. The conversation began as expected, talk of deadlines, strategies, the project that had kept me chained to my desk. But slowly, her tone shifted. "I don't usually stay this late," she admitted, looking out at the street lights. "I used to. Years ago. But somewhere along the way, I realized I'd traded too many nights for work that never really stopped asking for more." There was something in her voice, a softness I hadn't heard before. Not the polished authority she wore in the office, but something quieter. I found myself leaning in without meaning to, elbows on the table, listening not to a boss but to a woman who suddenly felt more real than her title ever had. "I think I get that," I said. "Sometimes it feels like we're just waiting to feel like it was worth it." She turned to me then, and for a moment her eyes caught mine, not with that usual assessing sharpness, but something warmer. Searching, almost. Under the table, our knees brushed, a light, accidental touch that neither of us hurried to move away from. It was small, simple, but in the quiet cafe, it felt like it echoed louder than it should have. She wrapped her hands around her cup again, nails tapping lightly against the porcelain. "You remind me of someone I used to be," she said softly. "Ambitious, restless. Always trying to prove something." I wanted to tell her I wasn't sure who I was trying to prove anything to anymore. Instead, I just nodded, letting her words settle. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, streetlights blurring into golden streaks on the glass. There was no urgency to leave. When the conversation finally paused, she glanced at her watch and smiled faintly. "It's late. Let me drive you home. No sense in both of us wandering the city at this hour." There was something in the way she said it, not quite an order, not quite a question. I agreed with a quiet, "All right," though part of me wondered if I just stepped into something I didn't fully understand yet. The rain had left the streets glistening, each passing streetlight casting long streaks of gold across the wet pavement. I followed her to the car, a sleek, understated sedan that matched her perfectly, elegant, efficient, quietly commanding attention without trying. She unlocked the doors with a soft click, and I slipped into the passenger seat. The air inside still carried the faint trace of her perfume, mingling with the cool night breeze that followed me in. It felt different sitting beside her like this. No conference table between us, no office lights buzzing overhead. Just the hum of the engine as she started it, and the muted patter of rain still clinging to the windshield. For a few minutes neither of us said much. The city slid past outside, closed storefronts, a lone cyclist, the red glow of a late-night diner sign. She drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near the gearshift. My own hand was close enough that a shift in either of our movements would have bridged the gap. "You live far from here?" she asked finally, her eyes still on the road. "Not too far. 10 minutes, maybe 15 if the lights hate us." She nodded, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Then we'll hope the city's kind tonight." There was a pause, not uncomfortable, but weighted, like both of us were aware of something beneath the surface of this ordinary drive. "I didn't expect you to still be there tonight," she said quietly. "Most people clear out the second the clock allows it." I glanced at her, the dashboard light painting her profile in soft lines. "I guess I wanted to get it right. Sometimes staying late feels easier than leaving things unfinished." Her fingers tapped the steering wheel, thoughtful. "I used to think that way too. Until I realized how many nights I'd traded for work that didn't always remember my name the next morning." The way she said it, half a confession, half a warning, lingered in the air. I wanted to ask if she regretted it. Instead, I just said, "Maybe some nights are worth it." That made her glance at me, a quick, sharp flicker of eyes meeting eyes before returning to the road. We stopped at a red light. The city was quiet here, the rain easing into a fine mist. For a moment, the heater hummed softly, warming the space between us. I could see a strand of her hair, loose from the day, catch the light. Without thinking, I wanted to tuck it back, but my hand stayed still. She let out a quiet laugh, almost to herself. "I'm too old to be driving at this hour." "You don't seem it," I said before I could stop myself. She glanced at me again, longer this time. Not reprimanding, just curious. The light turned green. The car rolled forward, and something unspoken came with it, a sense that this wasn't just a ride anymore, but the start of a very different kind of evening. The drive ended too quickly. The streets grew quieter as we neared my neighborhood, smaller houses, dim street lamps, the soft rustle of trees shifting in the late-night breeze. She slowed near my building, the engine humming low before settling into a gentle stop. For a moment neither of us moved. The wipers made one last sweep across the glass and stilled. The world outside felt paused, rain still dripping from the awning, the faint glow of a porch light flickering across the sidewalk. "I'll walk you up," she said suddenly, unbuckling her seatbelt. It wasn't a question. Part of me wanted to protest, to keep this from crossing that invisible line between professional courtesy and something more personal, but the words never came. I just nodded, grabbed my bag, and stepped out into the cool air. She walked beside me, her coat pulled tight, her heels soft against the damp pavement. I caught a glimpse of her profile in the yellow porch light, the sharp line of her jaw, softened by the tiredness of the hour. "This is it," I said, stopping at the steps. She nodded, looking up at the modest building, then back at me. "Not bad," she murmured with a faint smile. We stood there, me with my keys in hand, her with her hands tucked under her coat sleeves. The breeze tugged lightly at her hair, brushing a loose strand across her cheek. "Cold?" I asked. "A little." Without thinking, I unwrapped my scarf and held it out to her. "Here." She hesitated, a small flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "You don't have to, I know," I said. "But it's warmer on you than in my pocket." She let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, and leaned forward slightly as I draped it around her neck. My fingers grazed her collarbone through the soft wool, the faint warmth of her skin beneath. For a second, just a second, the world shrank to that small point of contact, the scent of her perfume mingling with the cold night air. Her eyes met mine then, close enough for me to see the reflection of the porch light in them. There was a question there, or maybe a warning, but neither of us voiced it. "I should go," she said finally, her voice lower now. "Yeah," I murmured, though my hands still lingered near hers. She stepped back, adjusting the scarf slightly as if to busy her fingers. "Maybe tomorrow," she said. "We'll talk. Just us. Not about work." I nodded, though my mind was already racing ahead, wondering what that talk would mean. She offered a small, knowing smile, the kind that said she was aware of the moment we'd both just stepped into, and turned toward her car. As I unlocked my door, I caught myself glancing back. She was still there, watching just long enough to make me feel it wasn't only me caught in this quiet pull. The rooftop lounge was nearly empty when I arrived. Just the city stretching wide beneath the dark, a few dim lights flickering from distant towers, and the low hum of music drifting from somewhere near the bar. I spotted her almost immediately, leaning on the railing, hair caught by the night breeze, a faint glow from the candles on the tables brushing against her face. She turned as I stepped closer. No sharp suit tonight, just a simple blouse, a coat draped over her shoulders, and an expression that felt lighter than usual. Still, there was a trace of caution in her eyes, the kind that comes from someone used to carrying more than they ever admit. "You came," she said quietly. "You asked?" I replied. "I figured you don't ask unless it matters." Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like the start of one. "It's rare I get to talk without people expecting answers." We sat at a small table, 2 glasses of something warm between us. The city lights flickered below, cars threading through the streets like restless stars. For a while, the conversation drifted, fragments of work, stray thoughts about the weather, the way the city never really sleeps. Then, slowly, she let the surface settle. "You know," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass, "I've spent years making sure I'm untouchable. Always the one who stays composed. But it's a lonely thing, being the person everyone looks to and no one looks at." I listened, letting her words settle in the quiet. "You don't seem untouchable," I said. "You just seem steady. There's a difference." She looked at me then, really looked, the way people do when they're deciding whether to believe what they just heard. The candlelight caught the edge of her eyes, softening them in a way I hadn't seen before. Her hand rested on the table, close to mine. Close enough that the heat of her skin felt like a question. I didn't move, not wanting to break the moment. After a long second, she closed the gap, her fingers brushing the back of my hand, settling there lightly. "I've been careful for so long," she murmured. "Maybe too careful." I felt the air change, not heavy, but charged. Like a quiet current threading between us. "I'm not asking for anything," I said softly. "But I don't think either of us needs to pretend there's nothing here. A faint, tired laugh slipped from her. You're too young to sound that sure. Or maybe I'm just not old enough to be afraid of saying it. That earned me the first real smile of the night, small, but honest. When we stood to leave, the night had grown cooler, but her hand lingered just slightly on my arm. And then, as the city lights framed her face, she whispered, not loud, just enough for the words to settle against the quiet. Tonight you're not my employee, you're mine. The city had quieted into that rare in-between, too late for the rush of evening, too early for the stir of dawn. We walked side by side, the glow of streetlights stretching our shadows along the pavement. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet asphalt and distant jasmine from a garden nearby. Neither of us hurried. It felt deliberate, each step its own small choice to stay in the moment a little longer. She kept her hands tucked into her coat pockets at first, but as the cold settled, she let one slip free, brushing against mine as we turned a corner. The touch wasn't an accident. Not anymore. Doesn't the city feel different at this hour? She said, her voice low, carrying easily in the quiet. It feels like it lets its guard down, I replied. Like it's finally breathing. She gave a soft laugh at that, the kind that comes not from amusement but from recognition. I used to walk like this a lot. When things felt too loud during the day, I'd steal the night back. Remind myself I was more than the noise. I glanced at her. The streetlight caught the curve of her cheek, the soft fall of her hair. There was something undeniably graceful in the way she carried herself, not because she was trying to impress anyone, but because she wasn't. Without thinking too much, I offered my arm. She looked at it for a brief moment, then looped hers through. The simple gesture closed the last bit of space between us, and suddenly I was aware of everything: the gentle weight of her hand, the warmth of her sleeve brushing against mine, the quiet rhythm of our steps syncing together. People would talk, she said after a while. Not accusingly, more like a fact laid gently on the table. They already do, I answered. About 100 different things every day. At least this one would be true. She tilted her head, a small, incredulous smile tugging at her lips. You don't hesitate much, do you? I do, I said softly. Just not about you. That made her fall quiet. For a few strides, all I could hear was the sound of her heels on the pavement, and the faint rustle of her coat against my arm. We paused near a small park, benches slick with rain, the leaves overhead whispering with the breeze. She let her head rest, just for a moment, against my shoulder. I feel alive, she murmured, almost as if confessing it to herself. Like I've been standing still for years and someone finally reminded me how to move. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, letting the night hold us, not asking for more, not pushing for less. When she finally pulled back, her hand lingered on my sleeve, fingers trailing lightly before slipping away. Let's promise something, she said. Honesty. No pretending. No games. I nodded. No pretending. And as we walked on, the city felt wide open, like every unspoken rule was waiting to be rewritten. The city was still, caught in that fragile moment before dawn where the night hasn't quite let go, and the day hasn't yet claimed its place. We stood by the quiet riverside, the water catching faint ribbons of early light. There was no rush anymore, no deadlines, no reason to pretend we hadn't crossed a line days in the making. She faced me with her hands in the pockets of her coat, shoulders relaxed in a way I rarely saw at the office. The air carried a chill, the kind that seeps into your breath, but not enough to drive us apart. If anything, it made the closeness feel warmer. I wasn't sure this would happen, she said softly, almost more to herself than to me. For years, I've convinced myself to stay untouchable. To keep everything clean and professional. Safer that way. I let her words linger. There was no need to answer quickly. Safe doesn't always mean alive, I said finally. Her gaze found mine, steady now, no flicker of hesitation, no veil of authority. Just her. A woman who had led, and given, and held herself together for so long she'd forgotten how to let someone else hold her. She stepped closer, slow enough for me to feel the decision in it. Her hands slipped from her coat pockets, and one of them came up, tentative at first, to rest against my jaw. The touch was light, her thumb tracing the line just beneath my cheekbone. Warm, deliberate. I felt my breath catch. Not because it was sudden, but because it wasn't. It was the kind of moment that arrives only when both people stop looking for an excuse to stop. You've made me feel. She paused, searching for the word. Younger. Not by years. By weight. Like the world isn't quite so heavy when you look at me. I let a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth. You make me feel the opposite, I said quietly. Steadier. Like I'm finally standing somewhere real. Her lips curved at that, the kind of smile that comes when two truths meet in the middle. I wrapped my arms gently around her waist, not pulling, just holding, enough to feel the subtle rise and fall of her breath, the steady heartbeat pressed lightly to my chest. She didn't flinch, didn't draw away. Instead, she let her forehead rest against mine, eyes closing for a brief, still moment that said more than words ever could. When she finally spoke again, it was with a quiet certainty. This doesn't have to be loud. Or rushed. Or anything more than what it is right now. I nodded. Then let's start with this. We stayed there a while longer, just standing, her fingers brushing lightly against my coat sleeve, my hand resting at the small of her back. The city slowly began to stir in the distance, but here, in this pocket of quiet, it felt like we had time. And as we finally turned to walk back, side by side, there was no tension left, only a sense of something beginning, not with a spark, but with a warmth steady enough to last.